Hey there, awesome viewers. Welcome back to Manhwa Empire Recap. Before we dive into today's recap, we want to hear from you. Drop your favorite genre of manhwa or manga in the comments below, and let us know where you're watching from. Your feedback helps us bring you the content you love. Now, let's jump into today's recap and explore the incredible stories we have for you.
Deep within the foreboding depths of the demon realm, a massive castle looms amidst the darkness. Here, the brave Vermouth and his 4 loyal companions embark on a daunting quest to overthrow the oppressive rule of the Demon Kings. With 3 of the 5 Demon Kings already vanquished, only 2 remain to test their determination. As an unrelenting horde of demons swarms towards them, Vermouth wields his blade with unmatched skill, effortlessly cleaving through their ranks with a single stroke, demonstrating his formidable strength. Indeed, the power of the renowned Vermouth is unmatched. Senya the Wise steps up, ready to channel her magic against their relentless adversaries. With a graceful wave of her hand, Senya summons forth a multitude of elemental energies, unleashing a devastating onslaught upon the demonic horde, proving her wisdom and mastery over the arcane arts. In the midst of the tumult, a priestess invokes the power of holy magic to shield her companions from harm. But as the demonic assault grows fiercer, it becomes evident that she is not defenseless. Enter Annie's the Faithful, the unwavering protector of the group, ready to stand firm against the encroaching darkness. With his formidable axe in hand, Annie's unleashes a devastating strike, cutting down demons with unparalleled ferocity, leaving a whirlwind of blood and chaos in his wake. Meanwhile, the valiant Moron, bearing the scars of numerous conflicts, urges Vermouth to pause and spearheads the charge through the demonic horde. This is Hamel, renowned for his reckless bravery and unwavering determination. Though envious of Vermouth and harboring a clandestine rivalry, Hamel's courageous deeds often went unrecognized by his comrades. With their enemies defeated and the battlefield quiet, the party begins to search for clues amidst the debris left behind by the battle. But as a new threat emerges, it is Hamel who rushes forward without hesitation, placing himself between Vermouth and danger. The attacker, a powerful demon, strikes with deadly accuracy, bringing Hamel down in a single blow. As the party hastens to Hamel's side, Vermouth contemplates the unnecessary loss. In his final moments, Hamel seeks solace in the honor of his sacrifice, lamenting only his previous deceitfulness among friends. With his last breath, he urges Vermouth to continue the battle against the Demon Kings, pledging loyalty in their shared warrior's bond. As Hamel's soul departs, he exchanges parting words with each companion, seeking closure and forgiveness in their presence. As the story draws to a close, it's revealed to be nothing more than fiction, leaving a young boy with gray hair and yellow eyes filled with frustration at the author's depiction of his former life. Contemplating the enigma of his existence, Eugene ponders whether the author's anonymity hides a deeper connection to his own past. He wonders if his companions also hold secrets from their shared history. For Eugene Lionhart, aged 13, once known as Hamel and now reborn into Vermouth's lineage, the quest to unravel the truth of his past and his companions' involvement in it is only just beginning. During his lifetime, Vermouth maintained multiple concubines in addition to his first wife. Eugene finds this peculiar, as he was never one to pursue women recklessly. He ponders whether he might have undergone a change of heart, yet concludes that it wouldn't be entirely objectionable, considering everyone has their own needs. So he comprehends that only the offspring of his first wife are regarded as direct descendants, even if they share the Lionhart surname. Despite bearing the same family name, Eugene's lineage is deemed an indirect branch. The families are prohibited from honing their mana skills and wielding actual swords until after the blood sacrifice ritual. At the age of 13, he boasts a considerable physique, and he muses that today marks the final occasion he'll wield a wooden sword. He diligently practices with his sword, his movements executed with remarkable speed and precision. Not long after commencing his training, he delivers a powerful blow that cleaves the training dummy in two. His father observes the feat with a mixture of awe and trepidation, his expression betraying a hint of fear. He remarks that this isn't the first occasion he's shattered such a dummy. Eugene then turns to his father, awaiting his response. His father takes notice of Eugene's muscular physique, finding it rather intimidating for a 13-year-old. He realizes that in a hand-to-hand confrontation, he might stand little chance against his son's strength. Despite being his son, there are moments when Eugene's demeanor unsettles his father. He doesn't behave or communicate like a typical child. In those eyes of his father discerns a lack of innocence, which at times instills a sense of apprehension. Reflecting inwardly, Eugene's father acknowledges that despite losing his mother at a tender age, Eugene has never expressed a longing for her presence. Eugene expresses his disdain for the local blacksmith, deeming their craftsmanship to be subpar. He continues by asserting that peddling such low-quality goods should be deemed a criminal offense, warranting appropriate punishment. Eugene also remarks that his father's leniency towards the blacksmith is overly generous. His father clears his throat before solemnly declaring that he'll issue a warning to the blacksmith. With that, they both acknowledge the impending blood succession ritual scheduled for the following day. Eugene privately considers the blood ritual of their family to be a nonsensical Lionhart tradition held every decade. Every child between the ages of 10 and 15, regardless of direct lineage or branch, gathers at the main family residence for the blood succession ritual. There, they take part in a trial to see who deserves the Lionhart mane the most. However, those from the direct line have an edge since they get to practice with real weapons and mana from a young age. This means they're ensuring the main family performs better, while keeping the branch family at a similar level. As he gazes at the broken dummy, Eugene's father is struck by his son's undeniable talent. He can't help but ponder the possibility of Eugene being born into the main family. However, he quickly dismisses the thought, realizing that if Eugene weren't so gifted, he wouldn't have to contend with the stark contrast between reality and his abilities. Curious about his father's somber expression, Eugene inquires about its cause, but his father brushes it off as insignificant. Refusing to accept his father's dismissal, Eugene surmises that his father might be reproaching himself for not being a better parent. Suddenly, his father grabs him by the shoulders. His father insists that he never compete with the children from the main family. Despite his talent, he emphasizes that Eugene won't be able to match the prowess of those kids trained in swordsmanship and mana. For a moment, Eugene smiles and assures his father that he won't, but deep down, he knows it's a lie. Eugene figured this would be a breeze since he's basically up against 10-year-olds. He notices another dummy not too far away. As he strolls toward it, he considers that in this ritual, there will be 3 kids from the main family and 6 from the branches. In his mind, Eugene dissects the composition of the main family. 1 child from the first wife and 2 twins from a concubine. He concludes that, apart from the top 2 authority branches, the others are essentially losers. Eugene hoists his sword into the air and obliterates another dummy with 1 swift strike. Filled with excitement, he eagerly anticipates seeing just how skilled Vermouth's descendants truly are. The following morning at the Vermouth main residence, as Eugene rides in the carriage to the ritual, he reflects on his past life as Hamel. He remembers considering himself a genius back then. Learning came easily to him, even as a child, and he made rapid progress. But Vermouth still praised his skill, suggesting that with more effort, he could become even stronger. In response, Eugene declared that he's giving his all at the moment. He vehemently argued that just because Vermouth is a genius, it doesn't mean others can be like him. The true issue, Eugene reflected, was not his lack of genius, but rather the presence of someone exceptionally skilled in swordsmanship and magic. That individual was none other than Vermouth the Great, known by the monikers God of War and Master of All. Reflecting on his former companions, Eugene remembers Vermouth's illustrious past as a duke in the Kiel Empire. Despite retiring from his position, Vermouth remained celebrated as a warrior until his final days. Then there's Senya the Wise, who achieved the remarkable feat of becoming the youngest Magi's Tower Master in the history of Mage Kingdom era. As for Annis the Faithful, despite her inner struggles, she is revered as a saintess in the Holy Empire Uras. Her teachings are even enshrined in scripture. More on the Brave, though his name may suggest otherwise, achieved something incredible by establishing a kingdom bearing his name. Naturally, one can't help but assume they lived fulfilling lives until their passing. Fury etching his features, Eugene wonders why the Demon King still draws breath. Eugene recalls the moment when Vermouth vowed to vanquish all the Demon Kings. He himself met his end at the Demon King's castle of incarcerations. It appears Vermouth made a pact with that Demon King following his demise. As a result of that promise, the war against the Demon Kings concluded, ushering in an era of peace that endures to this day, even 3 centuries later. A man named Lord Gordon, also inside the carriage, observes that Eugene must be feeling nervous. He warns Eugene that if he is indeed nervous now, he'll find it even more challenging when he faces the main family. Eugene gratefully thanks Lord Gordon for the advice, offering a smile in return. Gordon informs Eugene that they are now on Lionhart property, but reassures him that there's no need to prepare to disembark yet, as there's still some distance from the main residence. Eugene wonders why Gordon seems so smug, considering the property isn't even his. He mentions that the estate must be inconveniently large, to which Gordon responds that there are several warp gates scattered around, making travel quite convenient. Eugene considers asking why he wasn't permitted to use one of the warp gates, but he can already anticipate the response. Instead, he chooses to remain silent and offer a polite smile. After a while, they arrive at the main family residence, a sprawling estate adorned with gleaming gold accents. Eugene, accompanied by Lord Gordon, strides purposefully toward the main residence. Eugene doesn't find it surprising that there's no welcome ceremony awaiting him. From a distance, Eugene notices a flag proudly displaying the Vermouth Lionhart crest. Eugene knows that only individuals from the direct bloodline are permitted to wear the lion crest on their left chest. Eugene inquires of Gordon whether any other relatives have arrived, to which Gordon responds that it appears Eugene is the first to arrive. He then offers to lead Eugene to the guest house. Despite being a guest house, Eugene can't help but notice the grandeur of the rooms, even for someone of his status. A maid named Nina welcomes him with a warm smile, informing Eugene that she'll be responsible for catering to all his needs during his stay at the house. She extends her assistance and instructs him to ring the bell if he requires anything at all. In the back of Eugene's mind, he remains grateful for having a personal maid attending to his needs. Taking a seat on the bed, Eugene inquires about Nina's age. Nina replies that she's 16 and has recently completed her training period. Eugene smirks, inwardly noting that whoever assigned a freshly trained servant might be attempting to shift blame onto him if any issues were to arise. It seems like a deliberate attempt to inconvenience him, and Eugene suspects someone has a hidden agenda. Eugene asks the servant if she knows when the other family members will be arriving. She responds that they should arrive within the next 4 days at the latest. Eugene stands up and casually remarks to Nina to lead him to the training grounds. Nina is taken aback by the request, but readily agrees, leading Eugene to the training grounds. Outside the main building, a girl and a boy are engaged in conversation, discussing Eugene. The boy struggles to recall Eugene's name. In a hushed tone, the girl quietly mentions Eugene's name to the other boy, affirming that he's one of them. He speculates that Eugene hails from a small town in the western reaches of the Empire and likely trains with rakes instead of swords. The boy comments that Eugene's carriage must reek due to his humble origins, suggesting that even as a relative, he would still be held accountable for any damage to the main family residence. Absolutely, the girl, named Seal, agrees, nodding in approval. Let's go and give him a warning. The boy insists that they're merely issuing a caution and urges Seal to accompany him. Meanwhile, another member of the main family peers out of the window, observing their interaction. Seal catches sight of him and fixes him with a fierce glare, her eyes gleaming like those of a beast. The intensity of Seal's glare causes the boy to instinctively back away, fear palpable in his eyes. As Eugene starts his training with the spear, he reflects on his past life as Hamel. He realizes he was never lazy when it came to training, but this new body he inhabits has been rigorously trained since his reincarnation. No matter how strenuously Eugene pushes his body, he hasn't fallen ill once, and his injuries heal at an astonishing rate. This body of a Vermouth descendant is capable of feats he once only dreamed of. Nina gazes at him training, utterly mesmerized by his prowess. She imagines Eugene could move just as swiftly even with sandbags on his arms and wielding a spear. Suddenly, she hears someone approaching. Turning, she sees Cyan and Seal, whom she addresses as Lord and Madam respectively, and they inquire about Eugene's activities. Nina queries them about the purpose of their visit. Cyan repeats his question about Eugene's presence there. Observing their arrival, Eugene stops his training. Eugene responds by asking if it's not blatantly obvious that he's practicing with his spear. With a disdainful expression, Eugene insults Cyan, calling him an idiot. Seal urges her brother to take action, incensed by the insult hurled at him. Growing angry, Cyan demands an apology from Eugene. Eugene quickly offers an apology, leaving Cyan momentarily silent. Cyan insists that the apology wasn't sincere and demands Eugene to bow down with sincerity. However, Eugene rebuffs him, reminding him that they are of the same age. Furthermore, Eugene questions why there's a need for him to bow if they're supposed to be friends. Cyan vehemently disagrees, asserting that just because Eugene bears the Lionheart name doesn't make them equals. Seal interjects, reminding Cyan of the carriage, to which he concurs. In a fit of anger, Cyan orders Eugene to clean the carriage he used, insinuating that it must reek from the farm animals he tends to. Eugene, visibly offended, tightens his grip on his spear. Turning to Nina, Eugene inquires if she is his personal servant, to which Nina confirms. He then gestures towards the carriage, directing Nina to clean it. Nina is taken aback by the unexpected task assigned to her. Cyan's fury mounts as he demands Eugene to clean the carriage himself, but instead, Eugene instructs his servant to do it. In a fit of anger, Cyan accuses Eugene of disrespecting his orders, emphasizing his status as Cyan Lionhart. With a smile and a sense of pride, Eugene declares himself as Eugene Lionhart and expresses pleasure in meeting Cyan. The girl interjects, stating her name as Seal Lionhart. Despite this, Cyan remains angry, pointing out to Eugene that there's no merit in being kind to him as he disregarded his orders. Spotting a nearby sword, Cyan picks it up and tightens his grip on it. He then challenges Eugene to a duel, feeling dishonored by his actions. Cyan, filled with rage, pointed the wooden sword at Eugene and demanded a duel. As Eugene gazed at Cyan, he felt a sense of unease wash over him, unsure of how to interpret Cyan's challenge as it escalated to that point. So, Eugene expressed to Cyan that saying around the word duel so casually wasn't appropriate. Eugene then requested that Cyan simply leave him alone, prompting Cyan to question whether Eugene was afraid. Upon hearing Cyan's question, Eugene felt a surge of irritation and disbelief at the words that had just escaped Cyan's mouth. Meanwhile, Cyan continued to bluff, insisting that Eugene was too scared to face him in a duel. Cyan then went further, instructing Eugene that if he truly felt intimidated, he should bow his head and apologize. On the other hand, Eugene explained that he wasn't afraid of Cyan, emphasizing that he didn't feel the need to engage in a duel. However, he also made it clear that he wasn't willing to apologize either. Cyan misinterpreted Eugene's stance as a sign that he hadn't learned the concept of honor from his parents. Cyan believed that Eugene's unwillingness to engage in a duel meant he was trying to avoid confrontation. Suddenly, Eugene untied the bag of sand that was attached to his hands. Seeing this unexpected action, Cyan was confused and asked Eugene what he was doing. Eugene calmly responded that he was taking off the bag of sand because he wanted them to indeed have a duel. Eugene removed the sandbag and then firmly instructed Cyan to throw off his towel. And then, Eugene proceeded to remove his outer coat. He quickly threw off his coat, fully committing to the impending duel. As Eugene threw his coat to the ground, Cyan Lionhart grew increasingly anxious, sensing the intensity of the situation escalating. In his mind, Cyan Lionhart realized that Eugene had been training with something heavy on his body all along. As he observed Eugene, Cyan also noticed that he was removing the sandbag from his wooden weapon. Cyan realized the gravity of the situation and thought about the potential consequences of backing out. He feared that if he retreated now, his sister Seal would mock him relentlessly for the rest of his life. Quickly, Cyan removed his scarf, understanding that he must defeat Eugene in order to restore his honor. Quickly, Cyan removed his scarf, understanding that he must defeat Eugene in order to restore his honor. He threw off his scarf and then declared to Eugene that he was challenging him to a duel. Meanwhile, Eugene calmly removed the sandbag from his weapon, causing it to fall heavily to the ground with a resounding thud. And with a determined glare, Eugene firmly told Cyan that he accepted the challenge. As Eugene moved, Seal Lionhart was taken aback and visibly surprised by the turn of events. Eugene swiftly attacked Cyan with his long weapon, aiming directly for his core. As a result, Cyan felt a surge of pain as he hadn't anticipated the attack and was unable to do anything to avoid it. On the other hand, Eugene remained composed, glaring at Cyan with an intense gaze, fully focused on the duel. This sudden move caused Cyan to stumble to the ground, grumbling in surprise as he was pushed intensely backward by the force of Eugene's attack. As Cyan fell, Eugene instantly declared victory, seizing the moment as Cyan hit the ground. Quickly, Seal rushed towards Cyan, asking if he was alright as she reached his side. Meanwhile, Cyan was clearly affected by Eugene's attack to his core, causing him to feel nauseated and as if he was going to vomit. He then finally vomited intensely, unable to hold it back any longer, and Seal looked at him with disgust at the sight. Shortly after, Seal turned around and glared at Eugene, her expression betraying a mix of anger and concern for her brother. She told him that he was a coward, and what he did was not an honorable duel, expressing her disappointment in Eugene's actions. So Eugene retorted, saying there was nothing cowardly about it, and explained that it was Cyan's fault for letting his guard down as soon as the duel began. Seal acknowledged his reasoning and added that it was also because Eugene had trained his mana, implying that his preparation and skill had contributed to his victory. Eugene explained that he didn't train his mana, elaborating that those in the collateral line weren't allowed to control their mana until after the blood succession ritual. However, Seal didn't believe him and accused him of lying. Seal then explained that Eugene's attack was so fast that even if her brother hadn't let his guard down, he wouldn't have been able to react to it in time. As she said this, Eugene smirked, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He complimented how well she observed the fight, praising her keen eyes for detail and her ability to perceive the intricacies of the duel. However, Seal remarked that he had a foul mouth, to which Eugene simply replied that he had heard that comment quite often before. And then Eugene began to explain how Seal's brother was instantly defeated, providing insights into the tactics and maneuvers that led to his victory. Contemplating this, Eugene acknowledged that Cyan had potential for growth in the future. However, he also concluded that Cyan was nowhere near strong enough to match the caliber expected of Vermouth's descendant. Suddenly, Cyan began to rise to his feet, although he was still trembling from the intensity of the duel. He called Eugene a coward, his voice wavering with a mix of frustration and resentment. However, Eugene responded sarcastically, remarking that he guessed they really were twins, considering they both said the exact same thing. As Cyan was still struggling, Eugene walked towards him, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Eugene firmly stated to Cyan's face that if he truly considered himself an honorable and direct descendant of the Lionhart family, then he needed to admit his defeat honorably if he lost in a duel. In response, Cyan felt embarrassed and looked away, unable to meet Eugene's gaze. But in Eugene's thoughts, he wondered if he should have held back a little, considering the potential consequences, especially knowing that they were someone in the direct line of the Lionhart family. Shortly after, an adult showed up, addressing Cyan as their young master. The man looked at them furiously, his expression stern and disapproving. As Eugene observed him, he concluded that the man was likely a knight hired by the family, noting that he seemed quite skilled in his demeanor and presence. Meanwhile, Cyan began to slowly release tears, calling out for the man and addressing him as Hezar, indicating a deep emotional connection between them. Cyan clung to Hezar, tears streaming down his face as he confessed through sobs that he had lost the duel. He continued to cry, his voice choked with emotion, as he admitted that he had challenged Eugene to a fight and lost. Meanwhile, Hezar contemplated Cyan's words about having a duel. And then he turned his gaze towards Eugene, studying him intently, as if assessing his role in the situation. Shortly after, Hezar bowed his head respectfully and introduced himself to Eugene, stating that his name was Hezar and that he was in charge of instructing Cyan. On the other hand, Eugene also introduced himself, stating his name and mentioning that he came from Gidal. Hezar then remarked that it must be where Mr. Jihard's family is, and Eugene confirmed, stating that Mr. Jihard was his father. Continuing the conversation, Hezar asked Eugene what had transpired between him and Cyan. So, Eugene told the truth, explaining that his Hezar's young master Cyan had picked a fight with him and insulted his father. However, Cyan interjected, denying Eugene's statement. But Eugene asserted firmly that, regardless of Cyan's denial, knowing that Cyan had insulted not only him but also his father, it was enough reason to accept the duel. Then Hezar acknowledged Eugene's reasoning and conceded that his reasons were valid. Afterward, he shifts his focus to Cyan and mentions that it's crucial to prioritize treating his injuries initially. As they were leaving, Hezar expressed to Eugene his desire to meet again, while Seal also bid farewell with a smile, hoping for another chance to see him in the future. Meanwhile, Eugene also waved at them from the other side. After a while, Eugene grew hungry from training, so he headed back inside to eat alone. While he was eating, his personal maid arrived. Nina informed him that Deacon Hansen and Jules are scheduled to arrive tomorrow at noon, and the young masters Gargis and Desira are also planning to come in the evening through the warp gate. Upon hearing this, as he takes a bite from the tidy meal, he believes that they are assembling sooner than anticipated. His assumption is that it's related to the imminent initiation of the blood succession ritual. After completing his meal, Eugene promptly went outside. As he gazed up at the sky, thoughts of Vermouth crossed his mind. Eugene firmly decided to scheme against Vermouth's descendants, hoping they wouldn't be too upset about his actions. Then he raised a fist defiantly into the sky. In his mind, he contemplates that he didn't desire to become one of Vermouth's descendants, and thought that it's merely a damn reincarnation. Upon entering, Cyan, accompanied by his sister and his knight Hezar, proceeded directly to Cyan's mother. Embarrassed by the earlier incident, Cyan stood in front of his mother. Anisilla, his mother and the second wife of the main house, smiled as she sought clarification from Cyan. She wanted to confirm if what she heard was accurate, that he challenged a child from a branch family to a duel and lost. However, Hezar was the one who responded, confirming that indeed it was true. Upon hearing this, she instructed Cyan to come closer to her. Slowly, Cyan walked towards his mother, feeling embarrassed and shy. He lowered his face, displaying a troubled expression. His mother couldn't believe he lost from a single strike. Cyan was visibly hurt by her actions and expressed that it hurt. Ignoring his feelings, Anisilla instructed him to stay still. She then turned towards Hezar and posed a question. As Hezar remained with his head lowered, he explained to her that Eugene hasn't ever wielded any magical powers and doesn't possess any mana within him. Then swiftly, she proceeded to inquire of Seal how her brother Cyan had been defeated. Quickly, Seal elaborated, recounting how the duel began with Eugene swiftly stabbing Cyan with a spear. She described how Cyan, taken by surprise, attempted to retreat, but Eugene's spear was faster. Thus, their mother concluded that the duel had been deemed a victory after just a single strike. While they conversed, Cyan kept his head lowered in embarrassment. Cyan lifted his gaze, his face filled with pity and trembling, as he called out for his mother. To his surprise, his mother suddenly slapped him across the face, catching him completely off guard. His mother shouted at him for embarrassing himself in front of someone of lower rank, emphasizing that he even requested a duel against someone lacking mana. She continued shouting, expressing disbelief and embarrassment. She mentioned that their father would soon return for the blood succession ritual, and she was concerned about how she should face him and how badly the women of Theanis would mock her once they heard about what had happened. As Cyan held his hurting face, he began to cry and apologized profusely. She expressed that if she could, she would have killed him, but since he was her husband's favorite knight, she simply instructed him to train Cyan once more. As the tension escalated, Anisilla ordered Hezar to take Cyan away. As Hezar guided Cyan out, he offered a supportive hand on his shoulder while Cyan tearfully made his way. Meanwhile, Anisilla simply watched as both of them left the room. Upon their departure, Anisilla opened her fan. She used the fan to cover her face as she pondered something else. Then she glanced over at her daughter, Seal. She swiftly called for her daughter's attention, to which Seal promptly responded. Anisilla clarified if the boy her brother fought was Eugene. Then, with a smile, she instructed her daughter to befriend Eugene. With this sudden request, Seal asked her mother for the reason behind it. Anisilla then explained that it was because Eugene was currently strong enough to defeat her brother. However, in her mind, Anisilla considered that if she had her way, she would simply eliminate Eugene. Yet, she reasoned that if she did so, she would become the prime suspect. Continuing her thoughts, she considered that if a feud were to erupt with the Lionhart family, the guardians of familial law would intervene. Therefore, she concluded that she must avoid such a scenario. So, Anisilla explained to Seal that it was best to befriend Eugene for these reasons. Seal responded quickly, expressing her understanding, and mentioned her own desire to learn more about Eugene. She then agreed wholeheartedly to befriend him. Observing her daughter's response, Anisilla felt satisfied. She concealed the true reasons and plans they had regarding Eugene. The following day, 3 boys from the branch family came to the main house. They were Hans, the eldest at 14 years old, followed by Deacon, who was 11, and finally Jules, who was 10. Meanwhile, Eugene was engaged in training, running with sandbags attached to his feet. Eugene was drenched in sweat from his intense running session, simultaneously lifting the sandbags strapped to his body as he dashed forward. Suddenly, Nina showed up and caught his eye, calling out to get his attention. She informed him that the person he had been expecting had arrived. He then inquired if the other two members of the family were also coming, as he knew they were scheduled to arrive later in the night, but had come early. Nina confirmed his suspicion, mentioning that he was indeed correct about the early arrival of the two family members. However, she added that in addition to them, the patriarch had also arrived. As she mentioned it, Eugene pondered the arrival of the Lionhart family's patriarch. So Nina, feeling a bit puzzled, suggested that he should go greet the patriarch, but then instructed Eugene to change his clothes first. However, Eugene expressed concern that if he did change, he would end up being the only one late. So Eugene made the decision to greet the patriarch despite being sweaty. After a while, all the guards lined up to greet him, and the entire Lionhart family came out to wait for him outside. As they all stood quietly, awaiting the arrival of the patriarch, Eugene's gaze fixed on someone in particular. He locked eyes with the woman standing between Cyan and Seal, recognizing her as the second wife, Anisilla. He then noticed that the first wife, Theonis, was also present among the gathering. Moreover, the man standing beside her, who was clearly anxious and nervous, was the main family's eldest son and the first in line of succession, Eugene Lionhart. Shortly after, the patriarch arrived, as they were two men riding horses at the front, with two carriages following closely behind. At the front, the two men riding the horses also had white hairs. The one leading is known as Gillard Lionhart, and the one behind him was his younger brother Kion. Upon their arrival, Theonis regarded them with a stern expression, while her son averted his gaze, displaying clear signs of anxiety and nervousness about their presence. As Gillard dismounted, he first greeted Iode, remarking on how much he had grown and patting him on the head. He then asked if his skills had grown to match his height. However, Iode nervously turned his gaze away and replied that he was trying to live up to his father's expectations. Upon hearing Iode's response, Gillard was displeased and glared at him with a serious expression, indicating his dissatisfaction with the answer. Continuing on, Gillard noticed Anisilla standing with Seal and Cyan. He stopped and greeted them, remarking that he almost didn't recognize them due to how quickly they had grown. Seal then chimed in, expressing that they had missed him. Continuing, he turned his attention to Glifford. Gillard quickly bowed, and then expressed regret that he couldn't be with them during such a celebratory time upon hearing about their son. However, Glifford grew embarrassed and quickly told his brother not to mention such things. Shortly after, Gillard noticed the children lining up and inquired if they were from the Branch family. He then suggested that they all should have a meal together. Furthermore, he emphasized that after the meal, they shall proceed to discuss the blood succession ritual. After exchanging pleasantries at the entrance of the main house, everyone swiftly made their way to the dining area where the kids from both the main and Branch families, alongside Gillard, were already seated together. As they settled into their seats, a palpable sense of nervousness and anxiety lingered among some, evident in the lingering silence that enveloped the table. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the table, the three brothers, accompanied by Eugene and two other members of that came with the patriarch, were seated together. Next to Eugene, there were two other individuals seated, a boy named Garces and a girl named Desira. Eugene cast a glance at them and recalled that they were the individuals who had arrived with the patriarch. He pondered whether they were among the most esteemed members within the Lionhart branch families. Shortly after, he found himself wondering about the identity of the guest who had also joined them. He had assumed that only the patriarch and the children who had participated in the blood succession ritual would be present for the meal. Meanwhile, Seal also took notice and found himself wondering about the identity of the guest. So she proceeded to ask her father about the identity of the guest. As Gillard mentioned that he was actually about to introduce them, the person stood up and remarked that it didn't matter to him. On the other hand, Eugene remained unfazed. Meanwhile, the individual began to greet them and introduced himself, stating that his name was Roberian and that he hailed from the Red Tower of Aeroth. As he mentioned his name, all of them were taken aback, as his name sounded familiar to them. Iode was surprised, seeking clarification if he was indeed the Red Magic Tower Master. On the other hand, Eugene spat out his drink, clearly shocked. As a result, Eugene struggled to breathe and coughed continuously. So Roberian grew concerned and asked Eugene if he was okay. Eugene reassured him, saying that he was fine. However, Eugene suddenly realized that if she was the Red Magic Tower Master, she would supposedly be Senya's disciple. And if Eugene thought accurately, she would be the disciple of Senya's disciple's disciple. 300 years ago, Senya rose to the position of the Green Magic Tower Master at the youngest age in Aroth's history. Senya not only provided assistance to all the common magicians, but also extended her help to disciples of other magic towers, and even offered advice to the Magic Tower Masters themselves. Up until now, both the Green Magic Tower Master and the Red Magic Tower Master Reborn still consider the wise Senya to be their great master. As Eugene was lost in his contemplation, Gillard was observing him closely. Suddenly, he was taken aback when Gillard called his attention and mentioned that he had heard about him from Theonis. He emphasized that Theonis had informed him that his son Cyan had dishonored him and his parents. Confronting the matter, Cyan, who was seated beside his father, felt nervous and embarrassed at the same time. He lowered his head and avoided making eye contact. Meanwhile, Eugene acknowledged to Gillard that it was indeed true. However, he clarified that he harbored no ill intentions against Cyan. So, Gillard grew curious and asked if it was because Eugene had won the duel against him. Then Eugene answered, stating that it would have been the same whether he won or lost the duel. He emphasized that if he were unable to protect his own honor, then it was his duty to accept that fact. Hearing this, Gillard smiled in satisfaction and complimented Eugene, saying that he was better than his son. He then conveyed to Cyan that he didn't feel ashamed of his defeat. However, Gillard expressed his concern, feeling ashamed because he feared that Cyan had embarrassed him and was unsure how to handle the situation. Upon hearing this from his father, Cyan remained silent, continuing to keep his head lowered. Continuing, Gillard reminded Cyan that the duel had started based on Cyan's whims. However, he confronted him, pointing out that even after losing the duel to Eugene, Cyan still hadn't apologized to him. Cyan hesitated to apologize and instead wanted to respond by questioning what his father had said. However, Gillard took the time to explain to him that as a Lionhart, with Vermouth as his ancestor, Cyan should understand the importance of respecting not only himself but also others. So, Cyan felt he didn't have a choice and looked in the direction of Eugene. In a swift manner, Cyan apologized to him. However, Eugene could sense that Cyan was just forcing himself to apologize. Shortly after, Gillard remarked to Eugene that he didn't know his father. Eugene then responded, expressing his understanding, noting that it was to be expected given that they lived in such a rural area, making it unlikely for Gillard to be aware of them. They continued their conversation, with Gillard asking if Eugene's skills were the result of his father's teaching. In response, Eugene explained that while his father had taught him the basics, he had trained on his own thereafter. Hearing this, Desire was surprised to learn that Eugene had trained himself without a teacher. On the other hand, Garces was also curious and surprised that Eugene, having trained himself, managed to defeat Cyan. Meanwhile, Gillard, on the other hand, smiled in satisfaction and remarked that it seemed like the blood succession ritual was going to be an interesting one. After spending some time getting acquainted, the maids have now arrived with their meal. As they all gathered around, anticipation filled the air, a palpable excitement mingling with the aroma of the freshly prepared meal. The table was a masterpiece of culinary artistry, adorned with a dazzling array of delectable dishes that seemed almost too beautiful to disturb. As the food was served, Gillard smiled and told them that he was not sure if the food will be up to their expectations. But he quickly urged everyone to enjoy the meal and dig in. The night unfolded seamlessly as they relished their meal. Time slipped away unnoticed, wrapped in the convivial atmosphere of shared laughter and the delightful flavors that danced on their palates. After some time, the servants dutifully cleared away their empty plates. With the meal concluded and the table cleared, they wasted no time transitioning to more pressing matters, diving straight into a discussion of greater significance. Gillard promptly spoke up, stating that the reason he had arranged for them to dine together was to discuss the details surrounding the upcoming succession ritual. As Gillard broached the topic, the three brothers visibly tensed, their anticipation mingling with a touch of nervousness. However, Eugene remained a picture of calm, his demeanor steady and composed. Cyan and Seal listened intently, their attention fully focused on their father's words, as their father expressed his belief that the tradition of the blood succession ritual was inherently discriminatory. Continuing his explanation, Gillard elaborated that the ritual was traditionally reserved for the main family, and children from branch families were not granted the same privileges. He noted that children from branch families were prohibited from training with real weapons or utilizing mana until the ritual commenced. Therefore, Gillard concluded it was unlikely for a child from a branch family to surpass a child from the main family. Meanwhile, Gillard expressed his belief that it was fair to assess not only his own children, but also the potential of any child bearing the Lionhart family name. As Gillard mentioned Vermouth, Eugene couldn't help but have his thoughts momentarily consumed by memories or thoughts of him. Eugene mused to himself that it appeared his descendant was kinder than Vermouth himself. In conclusion, Gillard requested Roberian's assistance for the upcoming ritual. To this, Roberian calmly responded that it was precisely the reason she was present. Suddenly, Roberian snapped her fingers, a sharp sound cutting through the air and capturing everyone's attention in an instant. After that, a strange object materialized on the table, its appearance causing a collective gasp of surprise from those gathered around. Roberian stood up and explained that this year's ritual would take place in a maze she had created. She outlined the mechanics of the maze and how it would challenge the participants. She emphasized the importance of avoiding and, if necessary, defeating the traps and monsters he had strategically placed throughout the maze. However, she made it clear that all the obstacles in the maze were just illusions created by magic. She emphasized that whatever challenges or obstacles they encountered were not reality, but instead depended on their perceptions. But she also pointed out that despite being illusions, the experiences within the maze would feel as real as reality itself. Watching him, Eugene was impressed by Roberian's adeptness with magic. Roberian further explained that if any one of the 9 competitors were to successfully defeat the boss monster, the ritual would immediately conclude, and each participant would receive a point value by their individual achievements. Out of the blue, Hansen inquired if it would be acceptable if they were unable to find their way out of the maze. So, Roberian reassured them that he could manage to stay at the entrance of the maze, but he admitted that he wouldn't be able to achieve a high score. On the flip side, Eugene inquired about the potential reward they would receive if they successfully defeated the boss monster. As Eugene posed this question, Gillard simply grinned. Swiftly, Gillard then stated that he would permit them to choose any one item they desired from the main family's underground treasury. Upon hearing this, Eugene was filled with excitement and happiness. With the conclusion of the discussion, Eugene promptly set off on his own, walking alone. As he walked, he confidently pondered that he could easily emerge victorious in the ritual. Suddenly, he halted in his tracks as he caught sight of someone unexpected directly ahead of him. To his surprise, Garces and Desira were waiting for him, their gaze fixed on him intently. Garces stood in a confident manner, while Desira stood beside him, both of them looking at Eugene. Consequently, Garces approached him and inquired whether he had indeed emerged victorious in a battle against Cyan Lionhart. So, Eugene simply responded affirmatively, stating that he did. He quickly bypassed them, and Eugene mentioned that if they were done with their inquiries, he would leave first. Just as he was about to depart, Garces called out to him hesitantly. However, he didn't know what to say, so he let Eugene leave and then looked at Desira with a confused expression. As the night grew deeper, the full moon emerged, shining brightly overhead. Eugene continued his training under its glow outside the mansion. He continued his training, swinging his wooden sword from side to side with determination. He swung it with full force each and every time, his movements infused with deep contemplation. Moreover, he swung it in full blast, circling around him, kicking up dirt and smoke in the process. Suddenly, he noticed that someone was watching him, and as he glanced around, he saw Garces and Desira standing nearby. Garces and Desira stared intently as he continued his training. Desira stood beside Garces, holding 2 wooden spears in her hands. Going back to the moment when Eugene first noticed them, he felt uncomfortable and began to ponder why both Garces and Desira hadn't left yet. Suddenly, Garces walked confidently towards Eugene. As he stood in front of Eugene, an awkward aura enveloped them. Surprisingly, Garces suddenly removed his clothes, showcasing his muscles. As he threw his clothes away, he blew air onto his hands. Shortly after, Garces began to display significant physical improvement in his body as he proudly showed off his muscles and their definition. Meanwhile, Eugene was too shocked to utter a word, completely taken aback by Garces' unexpected action, leaving him speechless and in disbelief. As he observed Garces, Eugene pondered whether he was acting foolishly. Then, Garces pointed to and touched his chest, indicating to Eugene that he could touch it too. However, Eugene quickly declined the offer. Later on, Garces showcased his muscles and explained to Eugene that their family had a secret technique for muscle growth. He said that this position makes your muscles grow faster when you train, but it doesn't build up harmful substances in your body. So, Garces inquired of Eugene whether he was intrigued or interested in the aforementioned position. Soon after, Desire interjected, suggesting that if Eugene consumes it, he would develop facial hair, irrespective of his gender. Then, she confronted Eugene by mentioning that she had heard he wielded a spear during his battle with Cyan. Consequently, she questioned why he was currently employing a wooden sword instead. Eugene clarified that he is proficient in using both the spear and the wooden sword. Desire interpreted this as Eugene implying that he is skilled in handling all types of weapons. Out of nowhere, Desire hurled the other spear directly at Eugene. Eugene swiftly caught it with his bare hands. Furthermore, Desire expressed her desire to engage in combat with Eugene, proposing a duel using spears, as she asserted her specialization in wielding this particular weapon. On the contrary, Eugene believed it would be simpler to handle Desire than to contend with Garces, who was involved in drugs. Eugene agreed, intrigued by the prospect of gauging the strength of the high-ranking members of the Branch family. Shortly thereafter, they both assumed their positions and adopted stances, poised and prepared for combat. Before they could begin, Eugene noticed that Garces was still present, prompting him to inquire about Garces's presence. Garces responded by declaring himself the referee for their impending duel. Garces then asserted with such authority that even if their encounter was merely a friendly spar, it must be conducted with fairness and impartiality. Observing Garces's demeanor, Eugene suddenly questioned his own actions, wondering if his behavior resembled that of a fool. This prompted him to ponder whether he might actually be a descendant of Moron, given the similarity in their actions. Then, both Desire and Eugene patiently waited until Garces gave the signal to begin. Desire regarded Eugene's proficiency with both swords and spears as a mere jest, believing that he was merely bluffing about his skills with the weapons. Therefore, she was determined to demonstrate to Eugene what it truly means to master the art of wielding a spear. Quickly, Garces initiated the beginning of the duel. Desire took the initiative and made the first move, operating under the belief that the one who strikes first would emerge victorious. However, as she moved forward, she suddenly realized something. This realization caused her to come to a sudden halt as she forcefully planted her foot to stop her advance. She noticed that Eugene wasn't making any movements and remained stationary in his position. She glanced at him and realized that he presented no openings for attack, especially considering the aura of readiness that surrounded him. Therefore, Eugene couldn't help but wonder about her sudden halt, and he urged her to bring on the attack already. Desire grew irritated with his taunting demeanor. With a surge of determination, she swiftly moved towards him and launched her attack. However, her spear was instantly deflected by Eugene's spear, rendering her attack ineffective. This intense clash generated a powerful force between them, resulting in a whirlwind-like smoke enveloping the area with just that single defensive maneuver. However, Desire didn't hesitate to get back up and opted for another attack without delay. But once again, Eugene intercepted her spear, redirecting its trajectory to the side. This only fueled Desire's irritation and heightened her determination to launch another attack. She launched a flurry of attacks at him, but Eugene skillfully defended against each one. As she continued her assault, Eugene observed that despite Desire not utilizing any mana, she displayed considerable skill. He noted her young age and realized that she possessed limitless potential for growth. However, Eugene couldn't help but believe that despite her skill and potential, Desire still wasn't a match for him. Meanwhile, Desire persisted in her relentless attacks. With each strike, Eugene continued to defend himself, even as Desire exerted more force into her final hit. So, in a sarcastic tone, Eugene teased her, pointing out that she hadn't managed to land a single hit despite her numerous attacks. Meanwhile, Desire grew increasingly irritated with Eugene as she realized that he was able to block all of her attacks without even needing to dodge. This fueled her belief that Eugene's arrogance would ultimately be his downfall. Shortly after, she gathered her resolve and advanced forward once again. She continued her relentless assault while Eugene maintained his steadfast defense. Suddenly, Desire decided to change her tactics and maneuvered in a different way. She swiftly moved behind Eugene, aiming to catch him off guard and bypass his defense. As Desire shifted her position, she believed that Eugene wouldn't be able to defend himself from that direction. so she boldly advanced behind him, confident in her strategy. As her spear closed in from behind Eugene, he quickly prepared to defend himself and intercepted it with his foot. He skillfully stepped on the spear, halting its advance and preventing it from moving forward. As Eugene firmly planted his foot atop the fallen spear, effectively pinning it to the ground, Desira found herself in a challenging position as retrieving her weapon became significantly more arduous. Eugene applied significant pressure by bearing down heavily on the spear. Desira attempted to retrieve it, but she found herself struggling against the weight and force exerted by Eugene's foot. To her astonishment, Desira realized that Eugene's spear was already aimed directly at her head. This sudden realization caused her to cease all movement, understanding that the duel had effectively concluded with Eugene's spear poised at her head. Shortly after this tense moment, Garces declared Eugene Lionhart as the victor of the duel. After the duel, Garces became more insistent, repeatedly telling Eugene that they should collaborate and work together as a team. Meanwhile, Eugene woke up because Garces shouted loudly in the middle of the night. Eugene got annoyed at Garces and asked if he woke him up, since he was asleep and only wanted to say what he needed to say. At the same time, Garces was determined and didn't want to leave because he really wanted to hear Eugene's response about them working together as a team. Eugene explained that since they all knew they were going to enter through different entrances, he asked how they were supposed to work together as Garces wanted. So, Garces explained that even though they would enter through different entrances, they would ultimately end up in the same place, the center of the maze, where the boss master awaited. He proposed working together, pointing out that the twins Cyan and Seal were also planning to collaborate. Thinking about this, Eugene asked if Garces was suggesting that they join forces to defeat the boss monster in the middle, to which Garces confirmed that Eugene was correct. But Eugene replied, saying he felt like he could handle it on his own. Then, suddenly, someone remarked on how annoying he was. This made him turn to the other side, where Desira was leaning against the wall, listening to their conversation. Desira commented that he was quite full of himself, but she couldn't deny his strength. She then expressed to him that if he were to assist them, they would undoubtedly be able to defeat the boss. Hearing this, Eugene asked why they were so eager to defeat the boss. She then explained that it was because it was a ritual where both the direct and collateral lines participate. However, there hasn't been a single instance where the collateral line emerged victorious. Continuing, Desira expressed her belief that there was a possibility of success this time if the three of them worked together. Afterward, she asked if he indeed wanted to prevail against the main family. This question made Eugene pause and contemplate their suggestion. At the same time, Anasilla, the second wife, was gazing outside the window, pondering the situation. She pondered about Roberian, the master of the Red Magic Tower of Aeroth, who was invited to the blood succession ritual this year. She considered the possibility that Roberian might be there to take Iode, the first wife's son, as her student. Considering this, Anasilla thought about Iode, who, being young, preferred reading over being active. Given his interest in magic, she knew he had learned many different kinds of magic. Continuing her thoughts, she reasoned that if Iode became the student of the Master of the Red Magic Tower, he would have no choice but to leave his home. In her conclusion, she knew that while her daughter and son, Seal and Cyan, would grow insignificantly in power, it would also mean that Iode would be giving up on being the heir of the head family. However, despite these thoughts, Anasilla believed that there was only one problem: the blood succession ritual. If things didn't go as planned, she feared that her children would forever be labeled as the offspring of a concubine. Their position was only established because Anasilla refused to let it bring them down. But as she was contemplating, she suddenly remembered her son being defeated by Eugene, a member of a branch family, which angered her. Then she thought to herself that she would rather have Eugene clear the Labyrinth maze the fastest. She thought that if Eugene was indeed so powerful that he could humiliate the entire main family, it could overshadow her son's defeat. 4 days had passed, and finally, the blood succession ritual had begun. They were all gathered in the forest, with Roberian standing in front of the portal and Gillard by his side. As the ritual unfolded, Roberian channeled mana onto her hands, circling it around. As she finished, she distributed all the powers to those around who were participating in the ritual. Promptly, Seal and Cyan received their own. Also, Eugene, Garces, and Desira each received their own powers, as did all the participants. Shortly after it was distributed, Roberian announced that they would first create a weapon. She then instructed everyone to mold the light on their hands while visualizing a weapon in their mind. So, the participants tried molding it and were amazed, experiencing a mix of emotions in the process. After a while, Seal was the first one to mold a sword as her weapon. Upon touching the sword, Seal was amazed by how realistic it looked. Then she tried swinging it and tested its weight by moving it side to side. Afterwards, Seal inquired of Roberian the potential outcome should the weapon break, expressing concern over its durability. In response, Roberian reassured her, explaining that since the sword was conjured through magic, it possessed an inherent resilience, rendering it impervious to damage or breakage. After handling the sword, Seal's curiosity piqued, and she asked Roberian if it was possible to create something other than a weapon, perhaps an animal. However, Roberian clarified that while she could fashion a doll or a golem, the magic bestowed upon them did not extend to the creation of living beings. As she explained the limitations, Iode interjected with a question, pondering why they couldn't conjure something that was alive. So, Roberian explained that it was because creating life was a taboo in magic. She elaborated, emphasizing that the ability to give birth to another life was a profound and sacred power reserved for living beings. This explanation resonated with Iode, and he was filled with a sense of awe and understanding. Meanwhile, Garces independently crafted a weapon, molding the light into a sizable sword of his own. He then suddenly explained that it was a great sword he used to wield when he was part of the family. He elaborated, stating that it was a real sword, unlike the ones from back then. On the other hand, Desira wielded a spear, showcasing her expertise in its use. Then Cyan also molded a sword, following in the footsteps of his sister. Meanwhile, Iode remained conscious as he molded a small sword, though he lacked confidence in its creation. Then, the three brothers also molded swords of their own. On the flip side, Eugene, displaying his versatility, opted to mold not just a sword, but also a shield. With deliberate precision, he shaped the magical light into the form of a sturdy sword. Suddenly, Seal approached Eugene and posed a question, asking him what he would do if they were to encounter each other within the labyrinth. She then clarified her question, succinctly asking Eugene if he would be willing to fight her if they were to cross paths in the labyrinth. So, Eugene turned to Gillard and inquired if they were allowed to engage in combat with each other. Gillard affirmed that they indeed could, emphasizing that competition was part of the succession ritual. However, Gillard emphasized that while competition was permitted, cooperation and good judgment were equally important. He reminded them that they all shared the Lionhart name, emphasizing the significance of unity and respect within the family. As Gillard mentioned this, Seal couldn't help but cast a glance at Eugene, pondering the word family that her father had spoken of. As she thought of this, Seal suddenly displayed a playful smile. Upon noticing Seal's sudden playful smile, Eugene couldn't help but find it a bit unsettling, perceiving it as somewhat eerie. As everyone completed crafting their weapons, Roberian produced an item and instructed them to place it around their necks. She gladly distributed the items, handing them out one by one to each participant. She explained that the necklace would be connected to their minds, and if they became overly distressed, the necklace would react accordingly. Then, with a firm tone, Roberian stated that if such a situation arose, she would consider it dangerous and intervene personally. Looking at the necklace, Eugene thought of it as a safety measure to prevent any accidents from occurring. Shortly after, Roberian also stated that if they found themselves unable to navigate the labyrinth, they could simply tap the jewel on the necklace and shout help, allowing them to escape without danger. As she concluded her explanation, Roberian urged everyone to now enter the maze. With a smile, she explained that while they may be entering through the same entrance, each of them would be led down a different path the moment they stepped inside. Quickly, all of them moved right away to approach the portal. As Eugene was about to enter, Seal wished him good luck. And shortly after, Eugene entered the portal, ready to face the challenges that awaited him within the labyrinth. As he stepped in, he found himself standing on a floor that felt solid beneath his feet. He found himself in a dark place, with only shadows stretching out before him. Thinking back before he started, Eugene recalled moments from his past life when he and his companions had ventured into labyrinths before. He reflected on the countless explorations he had undertaken in various labyrinths throughout his previous experiences. Going back, he observed his surroundings and noticed that the ceiling seemed to be blocked off. Shortly, he decided to test out his weapon, eager to gauge its effectiveness in the unfamiliar environment of the labyrinth. Then he observed that as he swung his sword, it nearly reached the wall, indicating its considerable reach. So he pondered that with the walls on either side, the space was quite tight, making it difficult to wield a weapon with a long range effectively. Consequently, Eugene pondered that his decision to mold a sword and shield of basic size was practical, as this combination was versatile and usable in almost every situation within the labyrinth. In his mind, Eugene thought that the labyrinth would be easy to navigate since it was designed for kids. Upon contemplation, he decided to move forward and commence navigating the maze.
As the rest of the group began their journey through the maze, they encountered a scary creature that looked like a slimy monster, and it attacked them while they were making their way through. Eugene Lionhart, a member of the branch family, felt startled and scared when he encountered the slimy creatures. He swung his sword in a panic, trying to defend himself against the unexpected attack. Pressing the jewel in his possession, Eugene Lionhart let out a desperate cry for assistance, overwhelmed by the inability to handle the relentless onslaught of the terrifying creatures any longer. In a sudden moment, Reborn appeared to offer his aid, coming to Eugeni's rescue. Immediately afterward, the slimy creatures slowly dissolve, prompting Reborn to hasten their transportation back. Just an hour into the initiation of the blood succession ritual, 3 failures occurred, specifically involving the 3 brothers from the branch family. Reborn and Gilead glanced at the 3 children, clearly disappointed. In a serious tone, Gilead instructed them to go inside and rest. The 3 boys felt embarrassed, hanging their heads in shame, and one of them shed a tear. After a while, Reborn and Gilead returned to their seats, observing the progress of other children in the labyrinth. They watched closely and with seriousness as the kids advanced. Their gaze focused intently on Garces advancing forward with the large sword he molded as his weapon of choice. Garces accelerated his progress, more determined than ever to confront the goblins blocking his path. He positioned himself, ready to wield the sword. However, just as he was about to wield the sword, it scraped against the walls, its size causing him and the goblins to be caught off guard by the unexpected occurrence. The goblins laughed at him as his sword failed to reach them. Despite the momentary halt, Garces summoned all his strength to push the sword forward. Due to his strength, the sword broke through the wall, leaving it to move through effortlessly. In an instant, the goblins were slain before him, their heads and bodies severed by the swing of his sword. He successfully eliminated them, causing the goblins to dissolve into light, revealing their true nature as mere magic constructs. As Gilead and Reborn observed Garces, they noticed that his movements were unrefined, yet he navigated through them adeptly, effortlessly defeating the monsters without any apparent difficulty. Next, they turned their attention to Desira, who wielded a spear. As she made her way, she halted her advance when she encountered slimy creatures similar to the ones Eugene had faced earlier. But as they tried to attack her, she swiftly dodged each one of their strikes. And as she faced the last creature in her path, she thrust her spear into its center, only for her weapon to pass through without resistance. She realized that slimes were challenging opponents for blade weapons, prompting her to consider the need for strategic escape at the right moment. Quickly, she moved forward, leaving the slimes behind as she cast a glance back at them while running. In their thoughts about Desira, they concluded that she was quick and intuitive, prioritizing escape from the labyrinth over engaging with the monsters. Next, they turned their attention to observing Cyan. On his journey, Cyan proceeded with caution, carefully observing and scrutinizing the paths he traversed. Both Cyan and Seal possessed maps of the labyrinth provided by their mother. Cyan believed they had an advantage because they had extensively studied various strategies from the maps, giving him the confidence not to fall for traps. As he advanced, Cyan picked up a rock from the ground. Before proceeding down the path, he first threw the rock. Suddenly, as the rock flew towards the path, traps were suddenly activated. With the traps activated, Cyan safely passes through them. In their observation of him, they noted that Cyan was overly cautious. However, they acknowledged that his caution allowed him to evade traps effectively, which they considered to be a positive trait. Furthermore, they pressed on and turned their attention to observing Seal, Cyan's sister. A goblin stood in her path, advancing to attack her. But she quickly dodged it with ease. and in an instant, she moved forward and wielded her sword, piercing the goblin's head. As a result, she successfully eliminated the goblin, clearing her path ahead. Quickly, she moved forward with ease, anticipating what lay ahead. But as she moved forward, she noticed it was a dead end, realizing she needed to backtrack to the forked path from before. In their observation of Seal, they concluded that she was sensible and flexible in her thinking. However, they also noted that she retained a certain level of childishness. The next scene they witnessed was of Iode, visibly anxious, as he prepared to confront a menacing goblin, his apprehension evident in his demeanor. The goblin, with a menacing laugh and a taunting smile, presented a significant threat as it blocked Iode's path. Contrary to their expectations, Iode's reaction was one of astonishment rather than fear, as he believed the goblin to be a magical creation. However, he was caught off guard when the goblin unexpectedly launched an attack, causing him to flinch in surprise. When the goblin attacked, Iode found himself compelled to defend against the sudden onslaught. As the confrontation persisted, Iode managed to successfully vanquish the goblin, skillfully severing its head in the process. As a result of his actions, he effectively eliminated the threat, causing the goblin to dissolve into magical energy. When the goblin dissolved into a radiant light, Iode felt a surge of happiness wash over him at the sight of its disappearance. Meanwhile, observing Iode's reaction, Roberian couldn't help but notice his evident fascination with magic, sparking her curiosity about his interests. So, Gillett explained that Iode loved magic since childhood. He recounted how Iode had been fortunate enough to receive teachings from a mage professor hailing from the capital city. However, Gillett noted that despite this initial exposure, Iode hadn't actively pursued further magical education since then. This piqued Roberian's curiosity, leading her to inquire of Gillett the reason behind Iode's lack of continued pursuit in magical studies. Gillett explained that Iode had ultimately given up due to the harsh realities of life. He made the decision to prioritize his responsibilities as the future patriarch of his family because of his mom. Roberian comprehended the situation, yet she harbored a wish deep within her heart that Iode would ultimately choose the path of a mage. However, Gillett mentioned that if Iode still loved magic, he wouldn't refuse the chance to mentor Roberian in the ways of magic. But Roberian expressed uncertainty, stating that she couldn't provide a definite answer at that moment. She explained that while she was willing to accept Iode as her student, she emphasized that if she didn't see him fit to be her mentee, then she wouldn't accept him. Gillett expressed his understanding and reassured that he wouldn't force anything. He simply wished for Iode to wholeheartedly pursue his dreams and invest all his efforts into realizing them. He added that Iode held a greater reverence for Senya the Wise than he did for his ancestor Vermouth the Great. Roberian agreed, saying she also preferred Senya's stories because she thought Senya always came up with great solutions whenever their friends were in trouble. Gillett then confessed that despite having read about them, her favorite person wasn't Vermouth or Senya. This prompted Roberian to ask who his favorite person actually was. As he was on the brink of revealing it, Gillett suddenly noticed something. He hastily urged Roberian to look at the screen. He pointed towards Eugene's Labyrinth, where Eugene was currently confronted by a towering troll. At that precise moment, Eugene stood his ground bravely in front of the colossal troll. Shortly after, the troll made its move, its menacing actions signaling a clear threat as it advanced to attack Eugene. However, Eugene effortlessly dodged the attack and skillfully utilized his shield to diminish the impact of the troll's assault. As a result, the troll's attack missed its mark, causing it to punch the ground instead, shattering it into pieces. Shortly after, Eugene seized the opportunity and swiftly advanced towards the goblin, deftly striking it in every vulnerable area of its body with remarkable speed and precision. Roberian and Gillett were taken aback by Eugene's swift and decisive actions. Gillett was so impressed that he couldn't tear his gaze away from Eugene, marveling at his skills and exclaiming that he was truly amazing. In a blink of an eye, Eugene swiftly maneuvered, causing the troll to topple to the ground with remarkable speed and efficiency. In that moment, they were struck by how impressive Eugene was, marveling at his remarkable skills and feeling chills run down their spines. After defeating the troll, Eugene moved forward without looking back, leaving the creature behind. Once the troll was defeated, it dissolved back into magic, disappearing from existence once more. Meanwhile, Gilead and Roberian found themselves engulfed in silence, still stunned by Eugene's display of skill. Gilead expressed his admiration, noting that Eugene, at just 13 years old, displayed remarkable confidence as he cleanly defeated the troll. Meanwhile, Roberian contemplated the likelihood of trolls setting traps and their larger numbers below ground, leading her to marvel at Eugene's ability to easily handle the situation. However, Gilead countered by suggesting that despite Eugene's young age, he might possess exceptional talent, convincing Roberian to reconsider her doubts about his abilities. But Roberian pointed out to Gilead that he should be aware of what they call kids like Eugene. Children like Eugene were often referred to as geniuses, and there was a strong possibility that he was a descendant of their revered ancestor, the great Vermouth. At the same time, Garces found himself in a confrontation with a massive troll. He exerted all his efforts, wielding his sword against the massive hands of the troll, visibly struggling to defend himself. The immense force of the troll's punch was so overwhelming that it sent Garces flying backward. This caused him to tumble to the ground, but in an instant, he regained his footing and attempted to regain his balance. He stood before the towering troll, which glared at him with a menacing intent. However, Garces did not give up. Instead, he summoned more strength and determination. With courage fueling his every step, he advanced toward the troll, which was also preparing to counter his approach. As the troll attempted to attack him, he quickly dodged out of harm's way. He pressed on, steadily advancing towards the troll's feet, and ultimately, he successfully sliced through them. As a result, the troll's feet were cut, causing it to lose its balance and tumble to the ground. With the troll down, Garces seized the opportunity to launch another attack, causing the troll to panic as it struggled to anticipate his next move. The troll let out a terrifying scream as Garces thrust his sword even deeper, intensifying its agony. With its last vestiges of strength, the trembling troll attempted to grab hold of Garces. However, the troll's efforts were in vain, as it failed to grasp Garces, resulting in its hand falling to the ground, signaling its defeat. As Garces realized that he had defeated the troll, he stared at it with a heavy breath, his chest heaving with exertion. Shortly after, he celebrated his triumph over the troll with an intense scream of victory. But just as he was on the verge of screaming, the troll gradually disappeared, causing him to collapse to the ground in surprise. He attempted to sit up and regain his composure, shaking off the shock of the troll's sudden disappearance. In his mind, he couldn't believe that the troll had truly damaged his body and broken his ribs, leading him to conclude that trolls were indeed formidable adversaries. Shortly afterward, he picked up his sword and pressed forward with the realization that the other kids were likely experiencing similar challenges as he was. But as he walked on, he suddenly stumbled and tumbled to the ground, his body weakened and exhausted from the previous fight. On the other hand, as Cyan pressed forward, he suddenly encountered a troll blocking his path. Cyan felt a surge of anxiety and nervousness upon seeing the troll, wondering why a creature of such size would suddenly appear in his path. However, he guesses that the troll wasn't the monster he had set out to defeat. Behind the troll, Cyan stealthily crept and then hurled a rock to the side. As he threw the rock, it made a sound, causing the troll to turn around and take notice. This distracted the troll, causing it to turn towards the source of the sound. While the troll was preoccupied, Cyan seized the opportunity to slip past it and make a run for it. He glanced back at the troll, a smirk playing on his lips as he observed its visible confusion. Cyan pressed forward, refusing to look back at the troll as he continued on his path. Surprisingly, along the way, Seal suddenly appeared, visibly surprised to see her brother. Cyan saw Seal calling his name and turned his attention towards her. So, they were talking and thinking about why they met again since they came in through different doors. Then Cyan says that it just proves that the middle of the maze is closer now. Cyan confidently told Seal that she should just follow him so she wouldn't get lost, and Seal happily agreed to follow her brother. Moreover, Cyan thought to himself that he needed to seize this chance to restore his reputation after feeling embarrassed in front of his sister because of Eugene. Right when they were about to leave, Seal told his brother to halt. She asked if, because the labyrinth is just an illusion, any monster could show up. Cyan agreed, saying she was right, and then Seal asked if even things like ghosts could appear. When Seal brought up ghosts, Cyan's face suddenly became nervous. However, he bravely hid any fear he may have felt about it, which entertained Seal with his reaction. As he moved forward and reassured Seal, Cyan was unaware that there was a hand in front of them. He was instantly frightened as Desira suddenly appeared, her eyes looking scary and blood covering her. This caused Cyan to shout in terror and nervousness. In response, Desira also screamed and was startled by Cyan's reaction, while Seal just stood there, entertained by their reactions. Then Cyan realized that it was Desira. He got irritated and told Desira that she had no right to scare him like that. But Desira countered that Cyan scared her more because he suddenly screamed. Moreover, Cyan was still anxious confronting Desira about the blood on her, suggesting that she seemed like she was planning to ambush them. But Desira explained that she had simply fallen and gotten hurt. However, the truth was that Desira was irritated by the fact that her ambush had failed. Shortly after, Desira tried to slowly move away from both of them, and then Cyan noticed what she was doing. Then Seal shouted and told Cyan that Desira was running away. Cyan got irritated that Seal had seen his vulnerable side because of Desira. Thinking about this, Cyan felt angry at Desira and didn't want to forgive her. So, he told Seal that they should go after Desira. Quickly, they moved forward, determined to catch Desira. On the other hand, Desira ran knowing they were chasing her, realizing she wouldn't win if she fought them, so she wondered where Garces was. Meanwhile, Garces was still lying on the ground, clearly exhausted from the events that had transpired. All of a sudden, as Desira was running away from Seal and Cyan, the ground below her broke into pieces, making her wobble and lose her balance. She felt surprised, and then as she was about to fall, she thought it was a trap. However, Desira was swift on her feet, sprinting through it and avoiding falling along with the ground. Now, there was a gap in the ground behind her, which became advantageous for her. She kept moving forward while Cyan and Seal chased after her from behind. While Cyan was running forward, he also saw the floor collapse. He thought he might need to take another route since the other side seemed quite far away. However, he realized he couldn't do that because Seal was behind him, and he didn't want to be embarrassed once again in front of his sister. So, Cyan thought he was going to use his mana, even though he was saving it for the boss, but now he had no other choice. As he advanced forward, ready to jump, he enveloped himself in his mana. With determination, he sprinted quickly and prepared to jump with full force as he channeled his mana. In the blink of an eye, he propelled himself forward, his heart pounding with the hope that his leap would carry him safely to the opposite side. Finally, Cyan successfully managed to leap over to the other side. After getting over, he shouted to Seal, urging her to cross quickly, promising to catch her. However, to his surprise, Seal had already jumped effortlessly, not needing any help, as she too had used her mana. As she effortlessly landed on the other side, Cyan stood frozen in surprise, his plans to show off to Seal thwarted by her own impressive leap, leaving him momentarily stunned by her unexpected prowess. Moreover, Cyan recently praised his sister, remarking that her actions were in line with what was anticipated or expected of her. Upon successfully crossing, Cyan's determination surged as he resolved to catch up with Desira, expressing to his sister the importance of continuing their pursuit of her. Following that, Cyan, Seal, and Desira persisted in running along the same path, ultimately finding themselves unexpectedly but finally arriving at the heart of the labyrinth, where the formidable boss awaited them. Their astonishment was palpable as they laid eyes on the creature, swiftly realizing its identity as the boss monster. Suddenly, Cyan was startled when Eugene, standing behind him, spoke up, questioning why the three of them had come together. Confused, Cyan turned around and asked Eugene what he was doing there, to which Eugene replied that he was simply waiting. Eugene then remarked to Cyan that he was curious to see who would reach the center of the labyrinth first. Cyan, perplexed by Eugene's statement, sought clarification by asking if Eugene was indeed waiting to see who would be the first to reach the center of the labyrinth. However, Seal countered Eugene's statement by asserting that she was the first one to arrive there, to which Eugene admitted she was correct. Then, Desire chimed in, asking Eugene if his actions implied that he accepted her and Garcia's offer to defeat the monster together. Eugene clarified that he was actually there to offer them a chance to attempt defeating the monster themselves first. Continuing sarcastically, Eugene remarked that he could indeed defeat the monster by himself, but he felt it wouldn't be fair to all of them who had put in the effort to reach the middle of the maze. As a result, this baffling statement sparked anger in Cyan. Then, Eugene explained that the boss monster wouldn't attack them unless they entered its range. He pointed out that this meant it was essentially waiting for them to make a move. Continuing, Eugene suggested that they should engage the monster in a fight based on who arrived first. He proposed that Desire would go first, followed by Cyan and Seal. He then asked if this arrangement sounded fair to everyone. Hearing this suggestion, Desire asked nervously if Eugene was implying that they should each fight the monster alone. Eugene replied, noticing Desire's distress, by telling her that if she believed she couldn't defeat the monster, she should consider giving up now. But Desire, displaying persistence, asserted to Eugene that she wouldn't give up. Desire grabbed a piece of cloth and tied it around her head where she was bleeding, preparing herself to engage in the fight with the monster. Quickly, she advanced forward, holding her saber aloft and ready to confront the monster head-on. Then suddenly, Cyan asked Eugene why he wasn't fighting. Eugene responded by saying that he would engage the boss once everyone else had finished their battles. But Cyan expressed doubt, stating that he wouldn't have a chance and asserting his confidence that he would be the one to defeat the boss monster himself. Then Eugene smirked and said to Cyan that if he managed to defeat it, he would treat him with his highest respect. Cyan was caught off guard by that statement and didn't expect Eugene to propose such a condition. However, as he thinks about Eugene's proposal, Cyan's determination to defeat the boss grew even stronger. Since Desire took on the role of engaging the boss in combat initially, Cyan, acknowledging this action, opted to take a moment to relax and settle into a seated position first. As they observe Desire, they are eagerly anticipating and closely scrutinizing her actions, eagerly awaiting to see what decisions or maneuvers she will make next. Meanwhile, Cyan, gazing upon the boss, couldn't help but notice its size, which appeared to exceed his expectations, resembling a creature even larger than the troll he encountered previously. However, Cyan thought that although the boss was big, it didn't seem as tough as the troll and ogre he had encountered before. So, he believed he could defeat it on his own. Continuing, the boss remained dormant as Desire had not yet entered its range. But as soon as she stepped into its vicinity, the boss's eyes finally opened, signaling its awareness and readiness to engage in battle. The boss monster shifted in place, fixing its gaze upon Desire, who stood beneath it. As the menacing monster stood tall, Desire grew increasingly nervous as she found herself staring directly into its eyes. She was taken aback by its size when it stood up, leaving her wondering how she was supposed to defeat something of such magnitude. However, Desire thought to herself that just because the task seemed daunting didn't mean she could simply give up without making an attempt. Shortly after, she leaped forward, advancing with determination, and aimed her spear towards the monster. But suddenly, in an instant, she noticed that the monster's massive feet were about to stomp down on her. She acted quickly, narrowly dodging the monster's descending feet, narrowly avoiding being crushed. Then, with swift maneuvers, she regained her footing and swiftly resumed her advance towards the monster. She successfully thrust her spear into the monster, but it only partially pierced its tough skin. The boss's skin proved to be so thick that her spear wasn't piercing through easily, and she struggled, trembling with exertion, as she attempted to force it deeper. This revelation left Desire shocked, realizing that the monster's skin was too tough for her spear to penetrate. She found herself wondering what alternative course of action she should take. And to her surprise, as she struggled, she suddenly felt a sensation of impending danger as the boss's hand was about to grab her. The boss successfully caught her with its hands, ensnaring her in its grasp. As the boss squeezed her body in its hands, Desira felt an overwhelming sense of impending doom, fearing that her life was about to come to an end. But suddenly, it threw her with great force, causing her to fly backward through the air. This sudden action caused her to crash to the ground, landing with a thud. Desira struggled to stand up, her body trembling all over, while Seal and Eugene looked on, observing her with concern. Seal then turned to Eugene and inquired why the boss had ceased its attack on Desira and instead chose to throw her. Eugene then explained that the reason the boss stopped attacking was because it wasn't a real monster. Once it had Desira within its grasp, the battle was already declared over. As Desira's attempt failed, Cyan promptly rose from his seat, seizing the opportunity now presented to him as it was his turn to step forward and confront the challenge. He then directed a pointed remark towards Eugene, asserting confidently that he would demonstrate the clear distinction between a member of the main family and one from the branch family. However, Eugene simply responded with a smirk, a subtle yet confident expression. Cyan felt irritated by Eugene's smirk, seeing it as a sign of arrogance and a lack of respect towards him. He believed Eugene thought little of him. In response to Eugene's perceived arrogance, Cyan focused his energy, channeling his mana throughout his body in preparation for the impending battle against the boss. With a deliberate focus, Cyan channeled his mana directly into his weapon, infusing it with a pulsating aura of energy. Confidence radiated from Cyan as he tightly gripped his weapon, feeling the weight of its enhanced power in his hands. Desira's surprise was palpable as she beheld the vibrant aura emanating from Cyan's sword, her expression a mixture of awe and astonishment. Desira couldn't help but notice the clear difference between Cyan's impressive sword aura. It made her realize that the main family was indeed ahead in terms of skill and training. Even Eugene, known for his composed demeanor, couldn't help but be impressed by Cyan's use of sword aura at such a young age. Meanwhile, Cyan prepared himself, fully aware that the brief duration of the aura should be sufficient to vanquish the monster standing before him. But suddenly, Cyan's confidence faltered as he was taken aback by the unexpected disappearance of the sword's aura. He felt nervous and wondered what was happening to his sword when the aura suddenly disappeared. Then, suddenly, Eugene's thoughts turned to what Gilead had mentioned about the significance of the blood succession ritual. He recalled Gilead's words about the importance of choosing the rightful successor, emphasizing it didn't matter whether someone was from the main or branch family. In a sudden realization, Eugene connected the dots and concluded that the maze had been crafted by Reborn. It dawned on him that Reborn had intentionally designed the maze in a way that inhibited the use of mana for attacks at its center. So, Eugene concluded that if one could not use mana, they would be able to fight on equal footing within the maze. On the other hand, Cyan remained nervous and clearly confused, unable to comprehend why his sword aura wasn't manifesting as expected. Suddenly, Eugene sarcastically remarked that if Cyan couldn't do it, he might as well back down now and avoid being stubborn, sparing himself from a potential defeat. However, Cyan couldn't bring himself to back down, feeling embarrassed at the thought of doing so, especially with his sister watching. Deep within himself, he found the conviction that he could defeat the monster through skill alone and even without the sword aura. Shortly after, he advanced towards the boss with determination. As he proceeded further, it was inevitable that the imposing hands of the boss would also reach out to apprehend him. In a swift and deft maneuver, he skillfully sidestepped the boss's grasp, effortlessly slipping through the boss's defenses and slicing through their flesh with rapidity and precision. However, as the fight persisted, he realized that merely inflicting surface wounds wouldn't be enough to defeat the boss. He concluded that he needed to charge in and target its legs for a more effective strategy. So, he mustered his courage and charged towards the boss, specifically aiming for its feet. Cyan smiled triumphantly as he closed in on the boss's feet, thinking that victory was within his grasp. To his surprise, his triumphant advance was instantly halted as the boss swiftly blocked his attack with its knees. He was shocked, caught off guard by the boss's unexpected countermove. As he began to back away, he was caught off guard when the boss's hands seized him, an unexpected move that he hadn't anticipated. The boss swiftly hurled him aside, prompting Cyan to shout out in surprise and alarm. The force of the boss's throw sent Cyan tumbling backward, but he quickly regained his balance. With determination, he forcefully landed on his feet, striving to maintain his footing firmly on the ground. However, the reality sank in for Cyan as he realized he had already been defeated, his face contorted in disbelief at the swift and decisive action of the boss. Feeling deeply embarrassed, Cyan found it difficult to meet Eugene's gaze directly, his eyes avoiding contact as he grappled with the humiliation of his defeat. Shortly after, Eugene turned to Seal and informed her that she was next in line to face off against the boss. But Seal quickly asserted that she didn't want to fight, explaining that she couldn't utilize the sword aura effectively within the confines of the Labyrinth's center. Eugene, accepting her defeat gracefully, conceded that Seal's decision was indeed smarter than her brother's stubborn insistence on continuing to fight. With no one else willing to step up for the fight, Eugene went to retrieve his sword and shield, preparing to face the boss alone. He swiftly grabbed his shield and positioned it securely, readying himself for the impending battle. He then strode purposefully towards the boss, determination etched on his face as he prepared to confront the formidable foe. Before he proceeded, Seal asked if he could emerge victorious, but Eugene admitted he wasn't confident. But he clarified that he meant he wasn't confident in losing, implying that he intended to give the fight his all. Quickly, Eugene stepped into the boss's range, bracing himself for the imminent clash. He looked up with confidence, carefully observing the boss and pondering the best strategy to overcome it. However, the boss was already poised to launch an attack against him, leaving Eugene with little time to strategize. Thus, he skillfully dodged the incoming attack with ease, narrowly avoiding the boss's assault. As the boss's feet were firmly planted on the ground, Eugene seized the opportunity and attempted to exploit its vulnerable position by climbing through its arms. While he was scaling upwards, the boss's hands were already closing in, threatening to snatch him from his precarious position. But Eugene deftly dodged the grasping hands and swiftly continued his ascent, determined to reach his intended vantage point. After some time and considerable effort, Eugene successfully reached the top of the boss's head. Then, in a sudden move, the boss attempted to strike Eugene from above with a powerful punch. But to the boss's surprise, Eugene swiftly dodged the attack, causing the boss to inadvertently strike itself with its own punch. This caused the boss to scream in agony, while Eugene maintained his balance precariously perched on the boss's shoulder. Shortly after, Eugene decided to take action, swiftly moving into position to deliver a decisive strike. Eugene seized the opportunity presented by the boss's vulnerability and launched a series of attacks aimed at its carotid artery, aiming to weaken it with each precise strike. Seal, Cyan, and Desira watched in awe and surprise as they witnessed Eugene's impressive display of skill and strategy, marveling at his ability to capitalize on the boss's weaknesses with such precision. Desira keenly observed Eugene's attack pattern, noting that he focused his strikes on a single area, specifically targeting the carotid artery with repeated precision. Continuing with unwavering determination, Eugene prepared to deliver his final strike, aiming to decisively end the battle. With a swift and powerful thrust, Eugene pierced the boss's carotid deeply, delivering a decisive blow that seemed to seal the fate of the battle. This action elicited a deafening scream of pain from the boss, causing even more blood to spill from its wounded carotid artery, signaling Eugene's successful strike. The boss slowly began to falter, its body weakening as it succumbed to the effects of Eugene's relentless assault. In an instant, the boss collapsed to the ground, defeated, while Eugene gracefully landed on the ground, the victor of the intense battle. Eugene then swiftly wiped the boss's blood from his sword, a symbolic gesture marking the end of the fierce encounter. Moreover, Eugene made it look easy as he skillfully dispatched the boss, but the intensity of the battle and the precision of his strikes revealed the true mastery and determination behind his victory. Then, with a triumphant grin, he approached Seal and Cyan, eagerly asking if they had witnessed his impressive feat of skill. Cyan was at a loss for words, his disbelief palpable as he struggled to process the astonishing events that had just unfolded before him. So, with a hint of arrogance, Eugene boldly declared that he had single-handedly vanquished the boss. But Cyan, unwilling to concede defeat, asserted that he too could achieve victory if only he could utilize his sword aura effectively in combat. However, deep down, Cyan acknowledged that he might have been able to defeat the boss through sheer determination, yet he doubted if he could have done it as flawlessly as Eugene had. Staring at Eugene, Cyan suddenly felt a strange sensation wash over him, a mix of awe and excitement as he observed Eugene's prowess in battle. He felt a peculiar sensation stirring within him, leaving him puzzled and contemplative as he tried to discern the complex emotions swirling inside him. Shortly after, Eugene noticed with concern that his weapons were slowly fading away. As the realization sank in, they watched with a mix of awe and solemnity as the defeated boss gradually dissolved into ethereal light. Seal contemplated the scene before her, interpreting the fading of the boss as a sign that the blood succession ritual had reached its end. This also signified the end for Roberian and Gilad, who had been observing the battle from within the labyrinth. Gilad was filled with happiness and amazement, deeply impressed by the outcome of the ritual and the display of skill and bravery exhibited by Eugene and his companions. He turned to Roberian, expressing his awe at Eugene's incredible abilities, that despite coming from a branch family and not having completed his formal training yet. Gilad marveled at how Eugene had managed to defeat the Minotaur with such skill. However, Roberian contemplates, realizing the formidable challenge that the Minotaur had presented and understanding why the succession ritual they had made this time emphasized on teamwork. That's why she had believed that the children would need to work together as a team in order to overcome the daunting obstacle presented by the Minotaur. So, she couldn't help but be surprised by Eugene's ability to single-handedly defeat the Minotaur, sparking her curiosity even further about his background. Gilad couldn't help but smile when he realized that Roberian was also astonished by Eugene's skills. Eugene's impressive skill and unwavering determination during training prompted Gilad to gather information about him from his village. Moreover, Gilad stressed the exceptional talent of Eugene and highlighted the significance of discovering such a remarkable individual through the blood succession ritual. However, Roberian suddenly asked Gilad if he was not upset. Roberian remarked that it must be painful for Gilad, considering Eugene's excellence surpassing even his own children. Gilad responded by stating that it was actually a positive development, expressing confidence that the Lionhart name would shine even brighter as a result. Then, Roberian asked Gilad what would happen if Eugene desired to become the Patriarch. Gilad found himself contemplating this question more deeply. However, he conveyed to her that it is only fair for the stronger individual to get the role of Lionhart's Patriarch. He added that if his children are unable to maintain that position, there is nothing they can do about it. He emphasized that if his children were too weak to uphold the position, they did not deserve to be Lionhart's Patriarch. So, Roberian mentioned that she supposed it wasn't something an outsider like her should be concerned about. Continuing, she advised Gilad to adopt Eugene and suggested that he consider it as counsel from her. Gilad was taken aback by her unexpected suggestion and sought clarification to ensure he had heard correctly. So Roberian explained that Eugene had entered the main family, and they would risk being ridiculed if it was known he came from the branch family. Therefore, it was best to elevate him to the main family status. This made Gilad ponder, finding the idea interesting. He expressed gratitude to Roberian for her advice. However, Gilad suggested that they should first extend congratulations to the children. Shortly after, all the participating children swiftly returned, heading straight towards Gilad and Roberian. The children lined up in front of them, with varying expressions. Some had their heads down, others appeared anxious, while a few exuded confidences. Gilad then fixed his gaze upon his first child, Iode. He observed that Iode seemed embarrassed, recognizing that he couldn't even reach the center of the labyrinth. However, Gilad understood that Iode's distraction was caused by the various types of magic and monsters he encountered along the way. So, Gilad experienced disappointment, as he had expected Iode to prove himself during the blood succession ritual. Next, he turned his attention to Cyan and Seal, acknowledging that they still had much to learn and improve upon. Shortly after, Gillett announced with a smile, acknowledging that each one of them had performed well. He mentioned that they had observed each one throughout, initially thinking it would be challenging for them. However, watching their performances made him think the opposite. Afterwards, Gillett called Eugene's attention. He acknowledged Eugene and conveyed that, among all the children, he was the most impressive in the blood succession ritual. So, Eugene expressed gratitude, thanking him for the acknowledgement. Gillett emphasized that Eugene's methods for dealing with the monsters and traps, especially the way he handled the troll, were excellent. Upon hearing Eugene did not have a single injury fighting the troll, Garces was shocked, as he had also fought a troll but ended up on the ground due to wounds and exhaustion. Gillett contemplated the idea that if Eugene were from the muscle family, he could further enhance his physique and build the strong body he currently possessed. Then Reborn also expressed her opinion, stating that she underestimated all of them, as she had initially thought they would get lost in the labyrinth within 2 days. She suddenly found it interesting to watch the bloodline of Vermouth, expressing that it was a pleasure to observe children with such shining talents. Shortly, Gillett told everyone to go home and rest, mentioning that he had not expected them to emerge from the labyrinth so quickly. He added that he had planned to hold a banquet for them. So, Gillett suggested that they should rest for now and announced that the banquet would be held tomorrow. He turned to Reborn and instructed her to take the children back first. The children walked back quickly, their faces reflecting a mix of emotions. Suddenly, Gillett called Eugene and mentioned that he would go back with him. This sudden decision piqued Seal's interest. She asked if Gillett was going to give Eugene's present now, and Gillett said there was no reason for him not to. Seal felt jealous and expressed her desire to visit the underground treasury as well. She mentioned pleading with Gillett numerous times since she was young, but he had never taken her in the end. So, she watched in silence as Gillett went with Eugene. After a while of walking in the forest, it was getting dark as the sun was about to set. Eugene quietly followed Gillett from behind. Then Gillett broke the silence, attempting to initiate a conversation with Eugene by mentioning that he seemed capable of handling various weapons. Gillett expressed his impression, stating how he was impressed with Eugene's ability to excel with any weapon, having witnessed it firsthand himself. Eugene was surprised that Gillett knew about his duel with Desira, as Gillett mentioned he used a spear. This prompted Eugene to think that it wasn't surprising, considering Gillett was the patriarch. Then Gillett said to Eugene that the weapon symbolizing the Lionhart family at the moment is the sword. But he added that their ancestor, the great Vermouth, skillfully wielded multiple weapons and was renowned as the god of war and master of all. However, Vermouth wasn't the only one known for using multiple weapons. His companion, Hamel, was the second most skilled after Vermouth. Eugene then said to Gillett that the children's book he read mentioned that Hamel was called foolish. Gillett said that he also read it and mentioned that if it wasn't for Hamel causing trouble, the book would have been very boring. And then Gillett admitted to Eugene that he liked Hamel more than their ancestor Vermouth. This surprised Eugene, as he didn't expect an answer like that from Gillett. This piqued his curiosity, prompting him to ask Gillett about the reason. Gillett explained that he liked that Hamel seemed more human in comparison to the flawless Vermouth, even though it wasn't often portrayed in the children's book. He continued, saying that Hamel must have felt inferior to Vermouth countless times, but Hamel was never discouraged. Instead, in order to overcome his shortcomings, Hamel gave it his all. Then Gillett mentioned that in Hamel's last moments, he sacrificed himself for his companions. This made Eugene feel a little happy, as Hamel's story wasn't emphasized in the book. Then suddenly, Gillett turned, as Eugene seemed to want to say something. Eugene felt good hearing what Gillett said about Hamel, so he smiled at Gillett and said that he liked Hamel as well. This made Gillett smile in satisfaction as they both felt the same way. After a while of walking, they finally reached the underground treasure. The guard swiftly opened the door for them, and they entered promptly, carrying a demeanor of utmost seriousness. Upon entering, Eugene noticed a staircase descending towards the underground. They swiftly descended the stairs, and Eugene couldn't resist glancing around. While they descended the stairs, Gillett informed Eugene that he was the first non-patriarch to set foot in the Treasury. In response, Eugene inquired whether it was truly acceptable for him to enter. Gillett reassured him, stating that it was indeed acceptable. He reminded Eugene of his promise to reward him with something he desired upon winning the ritual, and assured him that the matter had already been discussed with the elders of the Senate. Upon hearing this, Eugene couldn't help but associate the Senate with its composition of the old Lionhart, including the former patriarch. Furthermore, he inquired of Gillett about the contents of the treasury, to which Gillett responded that it consisted of inheritance accumulated over hundreds of years, including a significant amount left behind by the great Vermouth. So, Eugene inquired whether the sacred sword was also among the treasures stored there. Gillett confirmed that the sacred sword was indeed present in the treasury, but expressed that Eugene couldn't have access to it. The reason was that the sacred sword also served as the symbol of the heart of the Lionheart, and therefore, it couldn't be possessed by a single individual. Upon hearing this, Eugene expressed to Gillett his disappointment, remarking that it was unfortunate. But Gillett clarified that it wasn't the sole reason. After the era of the Great Vermouth, no one had been acknowledged by the sacred sword. This piqued Eugene's curiosity, and Gillett hinted that Eugene would understand what he meant when he actually held the sword. Shortly after their conversation, they arrived at the ground. Upon reaching the entrance, Gillett bit his thumb. This action drew blood, and as his blood dripped onto what seemed like the key to enter the treasury. Upon tasting the blood, the lion's eyes lit up. In an instant, the door to the treasury was about to swing open. Quickly, the Lionheart's door slowly swung open, removing all of its locks. Shortly thereafter, it swung open completely, eliciting a sense of excitement and awe from Eugene. As the door stood open, Gillett instructed Eugene to enter. Eugene, however, questioned whether Gillett would not be joining him inside as well. Gillett explained that he would wait outside because Eugene might feel obligated to follow his lead, thus preventing him from freely choosing what he desired inside. This made Eugene happy, and he thanked Gillett for his thoughtfulness. Without hesitation, Eugene entered the treasury alone. Now alone, Eugene couldn't help but smile in excitement and wonder as he contemplated which weapon he would lay his hands on first. He stood there, gazing at the sacred sword thrust deeply into the ground at the forefront. The sacred sword was thrust deeply into the ground, emanating a radiant light and glowing with a mystical aura. Eugene then stretched out his hands confidently, wearing a smile as he prepared to grasp the sacred sword. Throughout history, the sacred sword has been present since the mythical era within the revered Holy Empire of Eurus. It is a divine blade gifted by the gods themselves. For an extended period, the sword remained sealed within the central temple, until suddenly, it recognized Vermouth as its rightful owner. Legend has it that this sword once pierced the heart of Helmand's fifth-ranked demon king of slaughter, 300 years ago. However, after that event, it was mostly used as a torch, its true power lying dormant for much of the time. This time, Eugene will attempt to obtain the sword and vie to become its rightful owner. In a swift motion, Eugene seized the sword. With unwavering confidence, Eugene gripped the sword, fully believing that he could wrench it from the ground. However, he didn't anticipate the struggle he would face in trying to retrieve it. He released his grip on the sword, rubbing his wrist as he struggled to retrieve it, convinced in his mind that it was futile. Eugene contemplated that even if he managed to draw the sword, he might not truly possess it, leading him to consider abandoning his pursuit of the sacred weapon in favor of searching for something else. Without hesitation, Eugene swiftly scanned the room, his eyes darting around as he searched for a different weapon that piqued his interest. As he wandered about, Eugene suddenly caught sight of a weapon that not only captured his attention but also felt oddly familiar to him. To his surprise, he laid eyes upon the Devourer's sword, known as Aspel. The Devourer's sword Aspel is renowned for its ability to absorb the mana of those it slays, incorporating it into its own power. Moreover, with a single strike, it can cleave through powerful magic, splitting it into two. This formidable weapon was once wielded by Vermouth as well. Gazing upon the sword, Eugene couldn't shake the feeling that it might be too much for him to handle at his current stage. After all, Vermouth had wielded it with such mastery due to his exceptional magical prowess. With a resigned sigh, Eugene decided to continue his search for a weapon more suited to his current abilities and experience. Next, his gaze fell upon the dragon spear carbos, a legendary weapon known for its immense power that rivaled the force of a dragon's fiery breath. Then, his attention was drawn to the windstorm sword Winnied, a blade blessed by the king of wind spirits himself. He then laid eyes upon the lightning bow Pronoia, a remarkable weapon capable of conjuring lightning to strike down its targets, regardless of distance. Continuing his exploration, Eugene's gaze fell upon another sword known as the Sword of No Return, Zabel. When infused with magic, this blade undergoes a transformation, splitting into hundreds of pieces and resembling more of a whip. Lastly, what piqued Eugene's interest was the Shield of Gaiden. This remarkable shield had the ability to redirect any incoming attacks straight into the void, rendering them null and void. Reflecting upon the array of weapons before him, Eugene couldn't help but contemplate. Each one held the promise of power and utility, and he was confident that any one of them would not disappoint him. However, despite the impressive array of weapons, Eugene couldn't shake off a sense of disappointment. He longed for the thrill of wielding a demonic spear or a moonlight sword, neither of which he found among the selection before him. Eugene's irritation grew as he realized that others had already claimed the great weapons before him, despite the fact that 300 years had passed since their last use. So, after careful consideration, Eugene decided to choose the windstorm sword Winnied. He believed that with its power, he could summon a wind spirit and, with enough mana, even call forth the king of wind spirits himself. Taking his time, Eugene deliberated thoroughly before ultimately deciding to take the Winnied. After making his decision, Eugene resolved to continue exploring the treasury and look around more. As he continued his exploration, Eugene encountered a plethora of items besides weapons, each holding its own unique allure and potential significance. He pondered the variety before him, noting the presence of jewels and accessories among the treasures. Suddenly, something caught his eye, piquing his curiosity. He reached out and grabbed the necklace, surprised by its unexpected presence among the other treasures. His surprise turned to astonishment as he realized that the necklace he held in his hands was the same one he used to wear in his past life as Hamel. The necklace held deep sentimental value for Eugene, as it was a keepsake from his parents that had been eaten by a monster and for which he sought revenge. Despite the hardships he faced, Hamel wore the necklace until his death. Eugene couldn't help but wonder why the necklace from his past life as Hamel was there, making him question if Vermouth had somehow recovered his body. Feeling a wave of sadness wash over him, Eugene couldn't shake the thought that Vermouth hadn't simply left his body to perish, considering the presence of the necklace in the treasury. Yet, Eugene considered the possibility that Vermouth's actions, perhaps tied to a promise with the demon of incarceration, had led to peace while leaving lingering threats from Helmut and the two remaining demon kings. As he pondered this, he suddenly reminisced about his former comrades, recalling their pledge to vanquish the demon kings as a team. Eugene found himself pondering the nature of the promise his companions had made, contemplating why they had left his necklace behind. He couldn't help but wonder what Vermouth had been thinking at that moment. Then Eugene entertained the idea that perhaps his own death had contributed to their failure, considering the possibility that their collective strength hadn't been enough to defeat the Demon King. Eugene refrained from placing blame on Vermouth or his colleagues, acknowledging that there must have been a reason why they were unable to vanquish the Demon King. Continuing his train of thought, he pondered the array of weapons he had coveted in the treasury, yet he remained plagued by doubt. He couldn't bring himself to part with the necklace, knowing it held sentimental value as Hamel's keepsake. After some time, he exited the treasury, and Gillett was taken aback by Eugene's choice of item. Eugene reasoned that the necklace was his most cherished possession, hence his choice. Gillett questioned Eugene's seriousness and pointed out the abundance of great weapons available, but Eugene simply replied that it was all too overwhelming for him. Then Gillett inquired if Eugene could show him the necklace he had chosen. Upon observing it, Gilead found the necklace to be crude and old, lacking any significant value as a jewel or craftsmanship. Upon closer inspection, Gilead concluded that the necklace appeared to be of low value, prompting him to question why it was stored within the treasury in the first place. Shortly after, Gilead placed the necklace in front of the lion statue. The lion's head suddenly illuminated with a vibrant red glow. He found it strange, realizing that the necklace didn't appear to be officially registered in the treasury's inventory. Then Gilead informed Eugene that the necklace wasn't part of Lionheart's treasury and shouldn't have been there, but Eugene insisted that it belonged. So, Gilead explained that the necklace held no significant value, and Eugene would only earn a cheap sword if he sold it. Gilead then asked if Eugene still wanted to keep it. Eugene then happily affirmed that he still wanted to keep it. So, Gilead, having no other option, reluctantly agreed with Eugene's decision. However, Gilead added that he would need to consult with Reborn to evaluate the necklace, given its unknown source and the possibility that it might be imbued with magic. Eugene asked if he could have the necklace back after the evaluation was completed. Gilead reassured Eugene that he could indeed have it back, promising to honor his request. Suddenly, Gilead admitted that he hadn't anticipated the situation unfolding in this manner. Consequently, Gilead acknowledged that since the necklace didn't originate from Lionheart's treasury, he encouraged Eugene to select something else from the treasury's offerings. This revelation surprised Eugene, and he asked Gilead if what he said was true. Gilead then assured him that choosing a treasure from the treasury was indeed part of the initial promise. Quickly, Eugene bowed his head in gratitude, thanking Gilead, and promptly returned inside the treasury once more. Eugene couldn't contain his excitement, thinking that Gilead was remarkably adaptable. He quickly ran, filled with excitement, realizing that he no longer needed to hesitate. Without hesitation or second thoughts, he swiftly grabbed the windstorm sword whinnied, eager to claim it as his own. In a moment of excitement, he swiftly drew his sword. With eager anticipation, he tightly grasped the sword, gazing at it with the conviction that it now belonged to him. Following the conclusion of the lengthy day, night has descended. Upon returning to the palace, Desire confronted Eugene, questioning why he didn't opt for a spear despite knowing his proficiency in using it. In reply, Eugene asserted that his choice was a personal one, emphasizing that he was equally skilled with a sword. However, Garces believed that Eugene's selection of a sword was too lightweight. Garces proceeded to express his opinion, suggesting that he believed Eugene would be better suited to using a hammer or an axe. Suddenly, Garces proposed that Eugene return with him to his family now that the ritual was over. Desire intervened and instructed Eugene to cease the conversation with Garces. Following that, she instructed Eugene to unsheath his sword. In contrast, Eugene simply stared at her, perplexed by her fixation on him. Nevertheless, Eugene complied with Desire's instructions and unsheathed his sword. To his surprise, as he did so, it became enveloped in a bright blue light. Desire inquired about the nature of the sword, and Eugene responded that it was the whinnied of the windstorm. He explained to her that, according to the Patriarch, the sword contained the blessings of the Wind Spirit King, and he could apparently summon it once he had sufficiently trained his mana. Upon hearing this, Desire complimented Eugene on the impressive nature of his sword, but also expressed her belief that he should have chosen a spear. Eugene responded by mentioning that there were numerous spears in the treasury, which left Desire suddenly amazed. Desire considered the dragon spear carbos and realized that wielding it in an attack would cause it to emit a dragon breath. However, Eugene informed Desire that he was not familiar with the appearance of the dragon spear carbos. Subsequently, Desire inquired whether Eugene had come across the demonic spear Ruentos, noting that it was deemed the most formidable weapon of the Great Vermouth. Garces interjected, stating that he was familiar with the sword, identifying it as a spear once wielded by the Demon King of Cruelty. Desire promptly pushed him, asserting that she didn't ask for his input. Eugene, in turn, suddenly found himself contemplating the Demon King of Cruelty. Ranked at number 1 was the Demon King of Ruin. Securing the second position was the Demon King of Incarceration. Holding the third rank was the Demon King of Frenzy. Occupying the fourth position was the Demon King of Cruelty. Suddenly, Garces asserted that Desira was mistaken regarding the most potent weapon employed by the renowned Vermouth. He informed her that the most powerful weapon he wielded was the Ziggular pulverizing flail, once employed by the Demon King of Slaughter. However, Desira claimed that the Demon King of Cruelty was stronger than the Demon King of Slaughter. In response, Garces asserted that the hierarchy of Demon Kings is not determined by the weapons they wield. Desira and Garces persisted in their debate, while Eugene contemplated that he hadn't witnessed all the demonic weapons mentioned by Garces and Desira in the Treasury. Contemplating the two weapons, Eugene considered them too ominous for the Treasury and speculated that the Lionharts might have sealed them away somewhere. Meanwhile, Garces and Desira persisted in their ongoing debate. Observing them, Eugene thought that their argument appeared too childish for his taste. As they continued their quarrel, Eugene decided to part ways and left them behind, pondering the two demonic weapons that Vermouth had left. Eugene was aware that the greatest weapon Vermouth utilized was the Moonlight Sword, a fragment shaped like a sword that had been sealed away, even within the demon realm. Both the King of Cruelty, wielding the spear, and the King of Slaughter, employing the flail, were defeated by Vermouth using the Moonlight Sword, illuminated by the light of ruins from it. Eugene then unsheathed his sword, intending to test it out. He found it exhilarating, considering it to be the first real sword he would be using in his lifetime. Thus, Eugene proceeded to wield the sword and test its capabilities. Desira and Garces suddenly became attentive when they noticed Eugene testing out the sword. They observed how he swiftly wielded the sword. As they continued to watch him, they couldn't help but stare at him wielding the sword. Eugene seemed to be dancing through the motions with the sword. His movements were as light as a feather. Moreover, Eugene continued to wield it as if it were an extension of himself. This left Garces and Desira frozen in amazement as they watched him. Garces couldn't help but think about how beautiful Eugene looked while wielding the sword. On the other hand, Desira was too amazed to even speak, completely focused on Eugene. Meanwhile, Roberian and Gilad were engaged in a profound discussion indoors. Roberian was assessing the necklace Eugene acquired from the Treasury. Upon completing her evaluation, Roberian experienced no particular emotions. Upon concluding the evaluation, she set the necklace on the table. Afterward, she conveyed to Gilad that there was no enchantment cast on the necklace. This led Roberian to inquire of Gilad whether the necklace was genuinely from the Treasury. In response, Gilad then asserted with a firm tone that it indeed was from the Treasury. Roberian inquired whether Gilad believed Eugene might be playing a prank, but Gilad stated firmly that there was no reason for Eugene to engage in such behavior. Gilad emphasized that by not allowing Eugene to choose another treasure, Eugene might not have been able to obtain anything at all. Feeling uneasy, Roberian expressed to Gilad that he agreed with the conclusion and sensed a significant risk if Eugene had indeed played such a prank. Subsequently, Roberian sensed that something might be amiss and informed Gilad that she would re-examine the situation. Gilad then inquired about the approach she intended to take in investigating the matter. Roberian proceeded to explain that there was a magic that reads the memory of individuals, clarifying that it was a spell created by Senya the Wise. Expanding on the explanation, she clarified that mana exists everywhere in the world, permeating most things. Consequently, Roberian stated her intention to read the residual memory of the person imprinted on the necklace. After Gilad's approval, Roberian proceeded with what she had intended to do. She grasped the necklace in her hand, attempting to glean memories from it. Her visible struggle was evident in her expression as she delved deeper into unraveling the necklace's true contents. As she delved into its memories, she didn't encounter anything particularly remarkable, but she did catch a glimpse of where it had been purchased. Then suddenly, Roberian gave up, stating that she couldn't read any further, speculating that the magic from the Treasury might have halted the necklace's memory of the mana. Gilad then pondered that he doubted anyone currently alive could confirm the source of the necklace. Roberian inquired what Gillett intended to do about it since they couldn't uncover any further information. Gillett then remarked that since the necklace lacked any magical properties, he would give it to Eugene. This statement simply made Gillett smile. Shortly afterward, he rose from his seat. Then, he glanced out the window, observing Eugene as he tested out his sword. Then Gillett turned to Roberian, mentioning that he had a suggestion for Eugene. This prompted Roberian to believe that she knew what Gillett was implying and what he meant by his suggestion. Gillett then happily declared that he would take Eugene Lionhart under his wing. He emphasized that he would take Eugene as his own child.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to contribute further, you can now buy me a coffee. Every little bit helps in creating more quality content for you. Just click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video.